Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the podcast. This is a pretty unplanned episode because I usually at the start of the year have a good idea what I'm going to be up to. And across the summer, I thought it was going to be pretty quiet with launches and things, but I was actually invited to the Health Optimisation Summit very last minute, I think only the week prior, by Amazing Earth, so one of the companies that I work very close with. They sent me an email and basically just asked if this week, so the week after, if I'd be in London and if they could take me out for dinner just while I work with them, just to meet the team and meet the US team as well. And I just said that I'm not going to be there that week because I live in Manchester, so it's like a 2-hour train journey. But instead, I could make it to the Health Optimisation Summit if they wanted to meet there. And so I got a ticket and I just worked a little bit on the stall as well throughout the day. But I've been wanting to go to this. It's been running for a few years now, and I wanted to go last year, but I just couldn't do the dates, I don't think. And one of my practitioner friends, Jennifer Fugo, was there, and she was asking if I could come down and meet her, but sadly couldn't. So I was really excited this year when I could go, I could make the dates, and all I needed to do was get train tickets down. And because it started at about 9-10 a.m. I needed to get there pretty early, so my train was at 7:15 in the morning. So I've not woken up at that time for a long while now, but it was so worth it. I was there at like 9:30 and yeah, went into the event at about 10:30. I just swapped over with one of the other team members who was going to be there on the Sunday, so I did the Saturday instead and got to meet Misty and Helen from the US team, and then Sophie, who I speak with a little bit more frequently. She's head of the UK team, and it was just so fun just getting to connect with people in person. I always forget how important it is just having an online business, and just the fact that I'm pretty introverted as well. I usually think that I'm absolutely fine just working online, not having any colleagues, but then when you go to things like this, you realize it actually is so important for even the most introverted of people. And just to see so many like-minded practitioners and individuals and new up-and-coming products, it was really cool. It was like Disney World for me. I was just stood at the top overlooking everything halfway through, and it was so busy, very warm in there. And apparently last year it was a complete heat wave, so I don't think I would have survived that because yeah, it was just really hot, and I was dressed for the cold and the rain because that's what it was like inside, but it was in a building that was like a greenhouse, so it was just very, very warm. There was all sorts of things there. There was IVs, there was medicinal mushrooms, non-toxic mattresses, barefoot shoes, different water filters and different supplements. So the water filter company, who is the sister brand to Amazing Air, or Air Doctor in the US, is AquaTrue. They were on the next stall to us, so I actually got to chat to the team, and I had a few concerns with reverse osmosis filtering because that's the type that they use, but they actually answered a lot of my questions and concerns, and I'm actually feeling a little bit more open to trying it now. So I might actually get one for myself, see how I like it compared to the Berkey that I'm currently using, and I might have them on the podcast at some point. We did discuss that, same with the Amazing Air team or Air Doctor team, so that might be a future episode this year. And there was a combination between stalls and workshops, and I think they did some breathwork sessions there, but also these talks with top speakers. And they have some similar recurring ones every year, and also some new ones. And I wish I had time to go to more talks, but if I would have been there both days, it would have worked out really well. But I actually got to see 3 talks. So in today's episode, I'm going to share the main takeaways, the snippets in case you didn't go, if you missed it, you couldn't go, you're not in the UK, although there were a lot of people flew international for this, so it's getting pretty big. And I also saw a few of the practitioners who were planning on doing talks. So I would have gone to Ben Greenfield's if I would have had time. I think he was talking on the Sunday. I just love him. He's been in the health world for a long time now, and he's very into biohacking. And I bought his book as well for my brother who's into fitness. It's called Beyond Training, so it just talks more about the importance of sleep and nutrition and rest and spirituality. And I just saw him throughout the day just walking around the stalls on his own, and he had such a strong aura and energy around him, and he's just such a legend. So I wish I would have got a picture with him and heard his talk, but maybe next year. The other three people I would have wanted to see was Jim Quick, who is the brain guy, and I've heard him on podcasts before. He's just amazing. Love hearing his work, and he just helps with things like memory and brain function and performance. Then there's JJ Virgin, who is another like OG in the health and wellness world. She is a trained PT. She also works in the perimenopause, menopause field. So I would have loved to have seen her live in the flesh. And then the last one is Gary Brecker. He's a practitioner who's worked recently with Dana White and Joe Rogan and these big people in the kind of boxing MMA world. And he was doing a talk. I think it was all about performance and these things like infrared sauna. So he would have been another person that I went to. But I'll just share a little bit about what I did before, like between the talks, because I was also working on the stall a little bit, just sharing the benefits of the air filters and how I use them as a practitioner. I got to see Dr. Seb, who's a biological dentist, on Instagram, and his lovely girlfriend, Ali. They're based in Huddersfield or somewhere in Yorkshire, and I actually refer quite a lot of clients to them because he's one of the best dentists in the holistic world in the UK, and they're actually pretty close to me. It's like an hour away. And I saw them walk past initially, but I wanted to say hi, but I was a little bit shy. And luckily they came back around, they walked to the stall. They're also affiliates for Amazing Air, so I think they just wanted to say hi to the team. And I took a picture with them, I put on my stories. If you would be interested in me like going for a consult and documenting my experience. And it was like 100% yes. So stay tuned. Hopefully I'll be doing that soon. And I will try and get Dr. Seb on the podcast to talk all about holistic dentistry and oral health. I've had an American holistic dentist on before. He's called Dr. Michael Gelb. This was, a couple of years ago now. He was talking about the importance of proper breathing, nose breathing, airways. And I'll link that in the show notes if you want to check that out. It's still a really good one, but it would be nice to have a UK practitioner on and just get to experience it for myself because I love to do that. If I'm going to be recommending supplements and diets and things to clients, I want to have tried them for myself. I actually got a chance to catch up with the Pure Maintenance team as well. The guy Sam, I'd connected with him before. He does have a business partner, I think he's called Josh, in the US, but he wasn't there. And he was throughout the day just sending people over to me, talking about healing from mold. And I did manage to see a few people, but apologies if you came across and you missed me. I was probably wandering around or going getting a coffee somewhere. And Pure Maintenance are a mold remediation company, and I'm still a big fan of them, love their stuff, non-toxic remediation, which is what we want. And they did my parents' house a few years ago. I documented everything on Instagram. So if you scroll back through my saved highlights, you'll be able to find that. And I also have them mentioned and a bit more information in my mold recovery course. You can sign up to that at any point. And still a great product, but I still want to emphasize the importance of getting to the root of the mold issue and not just jump into something like that when you've not actually figured out why it's happened in the first place. It could just be an old house, an old leak, you fix the problem, the pipe is no longer leaking, and now you're just cleaning up the damage. That's perfect. But if you still have an ongoing leak, poor humidity, wet building material that's not been removed, it's kind of a band-aid solution. And they do have guarantees and everything if it does reoccur, but I see fogging as being the last step. So I just want to put that point out there. And hopefully I'm going to be getting a discount code from them soon. And if I've got it by the time this episode goes live, I'll put it in the show notes for you. Otherwise, whenever I get it, it will be on my Instagram link, which has got my other affiliate links and discounts on there too. And then lastly, another thing that I did was go to a little stall. It was a supplement stall. I think it was called Pure Raw or something. And they sold really good quality companies, but I don't think I've heard of their brand before. They sell Quicksilver Scientific and some of these like liposol formulations. And they had a little sign that just says, do you want to do this quick 3-minute stress test? I was like, yeah, go on then. So I queued, and then it ended up taking about 15 minutes because the woman in front of me was just asking him 1,000,001 questions. And then I thought she'd gone away, and he like called me over to start my consultation. And then she asked him again. She was going through all of the supplements, and he was muscle testing every single one before she bought it. So yeah, fair enough. He's going to be there all day, but by the time I actually got to see him, I was feeling a little bit stressed because it was like the last thing that I was doing before I had to get my train home. And I thought it was just going to be a quick 5-minute thing, but yeah, it turned out to be 20 minutes, and I was scared I was going to be late. So he told me, he was like, yes, you're stressed. And I was like, how much of this is actually just me being stood in the queue for 20 minutes and the heat? And I didn't actually catch his name. I don't even know who this guy is. I know that he works in London. He was talking about some fertility clients that he has, and people travel all across the UK to see him. But then I looked in the video at his name tag, but I Googled him, and I Googled London and holistic practitioner, and I'm pretty sure that's not his name because I couldn't find him. And the person that was popping up was a dentist, and not even a holistic dentist or anything, just a regular one. So who knows who this guy is? I had a different name tag on too, so maybe he swapped with someone. I was wearing, who was I? I was Emily Salmon, someone else who works at Amazing Hair. But he also told me that I carry a lot of tension in my jaw, neck, and shoulders, which is true. And then he said it was caused by something linked to my relationship with my mum and also a romantic relationship. Initially, he said an ex-boyfriend, but I've only ever had one, and there's like nothing lingering to process from that. But then he did say it could be current partner, so who knows what I need to explore with either of those. But I left with more questions than I got there with. And there was a queue forming behind me. I had to go, so he was just like, good luck. But he also, I don't think he's a dentist because he smelled like tobacco. I don't know if he was chewing it or smoking it, but yeah, who knows who that wizard was. But he works a lot with muscle testing, kinesiology. I did a little video on my story of him doing it for me, and it's really cool. I've never had it done to myself before. I've done little bits of muscle testing on my own, but never had an actual practitioner do it for me. But then he works with all sorts of things, magnets and mirrors. I've not heard of the mirror work before, but just really cool. But let's get now into the takeaways, summaries from the talks that I went to. So they were all about 40 minutes long. And the first one, I wasn't planning to go to it, but as soon as I got there, Sophie from Amazing Air was like, this one's on, why don't you go and see a talk like as you just got here. So it ended up being Dr. Stephen Gundry, the first one of the day. And his talk was all about how to optimize your gut to reduce disease risk and live longer. And I'd known about his work for many years now, but never looked too much into it because he talks a lot about lectins. And I just thought that it was going to be very restrictive, cutting out all of these foods. A lot of it is plant foods. And at the time, a few years ago, it was the point in my journey that I was finally able to expand my diet. And after years of restriction and sensitivities, I just didn't want to start to hear that all of these foods that I was tolerating were bad. So I just purposely didn't look into that. But I was actually pleasantly surprised. He didn't share a ton about diet, and I don't know what his latest teachings are in his books or anything. I might check them out. But I did agree with everything that he was saying in the talk. He was talking a lot about gut health and the microbiome and longevity, leaky gut, intestinal permeability. So he was sharing how sensitive the gut is to damage. The overall size of your gut, if you was to like lay out your intestinal surface area, it's about the size of a tennis court. But at parts, the gut lining is only about 1 cell layer thick, which is crazy because the skin is around 7 cell layers thick. And think of how easy that is to damage and injure. So parts of the gut are only 1 cell layer thick, especially in the small intestine. And this is why it's so easy to damage. And that damage is called leaky gut, aka the sciencey name is intestinal permeability. If you want to look at the research and connections with some of these conditions he's going to be talking about, then you want to search intestinal permeability as opposed to leaky gut, because yeah, it's a bit more of a slang term. The thing is with lectins though, is that he, which I agree with, says that plants don't want you to eat them. They want to survive as well. They want to go on and reproduce. So a lot of them have these plant defense mechanisms, things like oxalates and lectins and phytates, which mean that you don't fully absorb them and they just come out the other end into your stool, and then they go on and live again. So it's like with sunflower seeds or chia seeds. If you were to eat them and not chew them, they're going to come out the other end, and that's the plant defense mechanism. But there are some benefits of plants, and there are ways to reduce the lectins. Cooking actually reduces a lot of it. With grains, which is another place that you can get lectins from, soaking and sprouting can do so. Rinsing them and just getting some of the shells and peels off sometimes can make a big difference. So it's, for me, not something that we have to avoid completely, but some people can definitely be more affected than others. And for him, from what I got from this talk, it might not be the full story, but he says that our gut bacteria these days, we don't have the types of bacteria, the types of enzymes, the strong stomach acids that we need to break down these lectins. So that's more of the problem. And that then leads to them being undigested and then causing problems. So it's not necessarily the food that's the issue, but it's the modern gut and the fact that we have changes to our microbiome, antibiotics and certain medications wipe out some of these bacteria that break down lectins. And one round of antibiotics can completely wipe out certain species, and we just can't get them back from taking a probiotic. He was sharing a lot about the connection between cardiovascular disease, artery disease, neurodegenerative conditions like Alzheimer's and dementia, and autoimmunity. He said if you have any of those diagnoses, you most likely definitely have leaky gut. And it's the biggest cause of inflammation and premature aging. And if we're just trying to do the standard anti-inflammatory diet that we hear about, which is eat more turmeric and eat more kale and eat more broccoli, this is like trying to put out a forest fire with a hose pipe. It's not enough. And these foods can actually, although on paper they're pretty nutritious and they've got lots of vitamins and minerals in there, compared to bioavailable animal nutrition, it's just not the same. And there's so much more that goes into inflammation than just food. Stressing about food can cause just as much, if not more, inflammation in the body, lack of sleep, taking all of these medications. So if you're trying to eat healthy, but every month you're still popping ibuprofens and paracetamols for period pains and hormonal headaches, that's more likely the thing that you need to work on than really trying to just get in 10 different servings of these foods. And the biggest driver of chronic disease and symptoms these days is this chronic inflammation. And the main place that this stems from, because that term itself is very general, even when we test inflammatory markers on blood work these days, it's something like CRP, and it can be elevated, but it doesn't tell you why. And then that's where you have to dig a little bit deeper. But most inflammation stems from the gut. That's where the saying, all disease begins in the gut, stems from. And the cause of inflammation in the gut is this intestinal permeability. So because we've had years now of antibiotic overuse, we have an epidemic of painkiller use and addiction, non-steroidal anti-inflammatory drugs like ibuprofen and paracetamol. It means that we've lost these species of bacteria that help us to digest gluten and lectins. The way that these foods are also grown is part of the problem. He didn't mention this, but I think it's an important point, is that with a food like bread, it's not just the gluten that's the problem. In modern farming, it's the hybridization that happens, the genetic modification, the pesticides that are sprayed, the glyphosate that's on there, and the extra fillers and bulking agents and preservatives that are used. I think that's a bigger reason that people react to bread and pastas. It's not just the gluten anymore. And then he really opened everyone's eyes to the vicious cycle that can happen with painkillers. So people in chronic pain, he's worked with athletes as well who have become addicted to painkillers. And it just becomes such a vicious cycle, because when you take them, you're destroying your gut bacteria, you're contributing to leaky gut and making that worse. And then that is the cause of inflammation and pain for a lot of people. So no wonder people get hooks on them and become addicted. It's part of I think they definitely know what they're doing. There's so many like examples of this. There was the Netflix, can't remember what it's called, the documentary or the little series about painkillers and how they knew that they were definitely addictive, but were promoting them for a long time to be not addictive. So yeah, that's another conversation. But just remember, if you are struggling with pain, then that treatment might give you temporary relief, but it's actually going to make the issue worse in the long run. That can be the case with antibiotics as well. Short-term use of antibiotics might help your bacterial levels and your skin or any other vaginal infection, but if you're not getting to the root cause, it's just making your overall immune system weaker and more susceptible to infection in the long run. He covered the medication PPIs as well. They can be just as problematic. I would also put birth controls under this as well. Birth control pills, they can have similar effects to antibiotics on the gut, but PPIs are some of the worst. Examples of these are omeprazole, stomach acid blocking medication. They are drivers and causes of SIBO, small intestine bacterial overgrowth, and they can be linked now to Alzheimer's and dementia development long term because of the way that they impact your nutrient absorption, especially B12 absorption. And back in the day, they used to be used and prescribed for short-term treatment, for short-term relief. If someone had a stomach ulcer, they would be on it for a couple of weeks and they would be weaned off. But now there's so many people on it for decades and they're just not being taught about the underlying causes of acid reflux or heartburn and how 95% of the time it's actually low stomach acid that's contributing, not high stomach acid. So you're really just making the problem worse by keeping your stomach acid low. And then the upper gut, especially the stomach should be the most acidic. And then as it goes further down, it becomes less acidic. So the small intestine is still pretty acidic, but the large colon, the large intestine should be more alkaline. And when we take stomach acid blockers, that completely weakens the stomach acid. It makes you a more susceptible host for parasites and yeast overgrowth. It stops us digesting our food. And then we get this buildup of bacteria because the acid should keep that all in check. And with SIBO, small intestine bacterial overgrowth, you can also have CFO, fungal overgrowth. It's not bad bacteria that's overgrowing. It's just that they aren't being kept in check and they can steal a lot of our nutrients. A lot of times iron deficiency can be linked to SIBO and they just irritate the gut lining and contribute to leaky gut. And this strong acid that we should have, the stomach acid should be similar to battery acid, a pH between 1 and 2. This is also another mechanism that helps to break down proteins such as lectins in our food and our upper gut. So if that doesn't happen, that's why lectins can become a problem and they can be linked to chronic pain and inflammation, joint issues in the body. Another thing he spoke about was cholesterol and how cholesterol doesn't cause heart disease. And he said, don't blame cholesterol for what triglycerides do and high blood sugar does. I've heard the analogy before and I often share it with clients, but he said, imagine you were an alien on Earth and you came down and you saw car accidents. And every time you saw a car accident, you saw an ambulance. You would very quickly come to the conclusion that the ambulances are involved, they're part of the problem. That's exactly what's happening with cholesterol. Because they're at the scene of the crime, it doesn't mean that they are the cause. So what actually happens is we have this buildup of triglycerides, which is a large part coming from carbohydrates that are in excess or aren't used efficiently by the body. So carbs aren't the problem. And some people can eat a high carbohydrate diet, but if they're burning it efficiently, it's not an issue. It's when we're eating too much for what we need, we're not moving enough, or it's just not being processed as it should. We have insulin resistance or other conditions that those carbohydrates and sugars can turn into triglycerides, which is fat, and that is the thing that damages arteries. So when they do autopsies or surgeries to look inside the arteries, we see that damage and we see cholesterol there, but it's actually not the cause. The cholesterol was sent there to try and heal and act as like a bandage to support the recovery. And another thing that contributes to cardiovascular disease, not cholesterol, is things like stress and mineral deficiencies. So it's damage to the arteries from something else. Poor sleep can do the same. High blood pressure for so long, but then the cholesterol is sent there as actually a healing solution. It's a healing fat. It's also a precursor to all of our hormones and our cells. And low cholesterol can be just as problematic as high cholesterol. So I like it to be in a balance between 4.5 and 5.5 in UK readings. It's a bit different in US readings, but you can easily convert that. And these days we live in a perpetual summer where carbohydrates are always freely available. We could go to the supermarket right now and get all the carbs, the cereals, the cakes, the crisps, but even fruit, bananas shipped across the world. And we're also so sedentary. This is a theme that I think every single speaker covered, was the fact that we're not moving as much as we should be. So our body doesn't metabolize the carbohydrates if we're just sat at our desks all day. He then shared 4 myths of aging, which I loved. So number 1 was forgetfulness and cognitive decline are a normal part of aging. Not true. Number 2, it's normal to feel stiffness and pain in your joints as you get older. Number 3, genetics determine your fate. So if your parents had a really difficult time or a certain diagnosis like Alzheimer's, it doesn't mean that you're necessarily going to get it. It might increase the chances if you don't do anything, but it's not set in stone. And number 4, the myth of you can't control aging. You absolutely can. There's so much that you can do, and a lot of it is very simple. He'd also studied the blue zone, sorry, of the planet, and he had lived in Loma Linda, which is the only one in America. I think it's in California. He'd lived there for a bit, but at the time he was vegetarian. He's not now. He doesn't promote like an excess of animal protein, but he doesn't say to avoid it. But he showed pictures and he actually looks like 20 years younger now. And he came to the conclusion, and I think it's becoming more well known now, that these blue zones, it's not the fact that they're vegetarian that's the thing, it's that they're actually in community. That's the biggest takeaway. He showed as well that the blue zone myth that our diet should be rich in grains and beans isn't ideal because they can be really high in lectins. And the Mediterranean diet, the reason that is pretty healing and pretty beneficial is mainly because of the polyphenol content, the biggest one being olive oil. Extra virgin olive oil, it has prebiotic effects on the gut, it nourishes our gut bacteria, it strengthens our immune system and our defenses. He spoke about the benefits of resistant starch and how our gut bacteria loves that. So they all gave tangible takeaway tips towards the end. So he was saying, Dr. Stephen was saying, to increase resistant starch intake, you want to do this very slowly. And if you have a condition like SIBO, you want to address that first. But you can create resistant starch by cooking and then cooling things like white potato and rice. So it helps you to meal prep too. So you could do a big batch of that on the weekend and then eat it for a few days afterwards. And our good bacteria love that. And with olive oil, there's some people in these blue zones that consume 1 liter of olive oil every single week, which is around 10 tablespoons a day. I think that's crazy, but it is one of the best polyphenols. I think he said he was working towards that amount with his wife at the moment, but combined, I think they go through 1 liter a week. And another food as medicine thing he shared was consuming 2 cups of mushrooms per week can and has been shown in studies to reduce cognitive decline by 70%, which is crazy. And then what else? He said, eat as if your life depends on it, because it does. So true. And he said, get a dog for your microbiome. And he said, make sure that it licks your face, which I thought was funny. I got a dog last year and it has benefited my health in so many ways. Just even the fact that you have to walk it multiple times a day, get outside in all weathers, and just the happiness and the neurotransmitters and the oxytocin that you get are so many benefits. And with microbiome and socialization, he said every culture has a way of connecting through kissing. And that is partly because of the fact that that allows us to share our oral microbiome with each other. So really cool. He showed some great stuff. As I said, I agreed with everything that he showed in the presentation, but I should probably look a little bit more about his work, and I would recommend you doing so too. So that was Dr. Stephen Gundry. That was the first talk that I went to. The second one was a few hours later, and this one was from Mike Mutzel. His talk was Cracking the Metabolic Code, and he has, this is someone else I've been following for a while. He does share some information about low-carb diets and fasting that I'm less into these days, especially for women, but he talks a lot about fitness and metabolism, so that's what the presentation was about at the expo. And he shared a term called exercise resistance. I think I came into this one a little bit late. I think he was already 10-15 minutes in, so I missed the start. But he shared a term that I'd never heard of before. It's called exercise resistance, which is different than I was expecting. He said it's actually it's a process that means when you don't exercise, when you're sedentary, you're actually unable to burn fat, which is really interesting. So you could be doing all of the diet stuff, but you're not tapping into your full potential and full capabilities if you're not exercising, if you're sedentary. Crazy statistics he shared are things like 96% of Americans have some degree of metabolic dysfunction these days. So this will include diagnosed type 2 diabetes, pre-diabetes, but then there's also this huge group of people who are on their way to that. And this isn't just happening when you're 40, 50, 60. This is happening now in childhood, teenagers, and even a lot of my 20-year-old clients are struggling with this, and it can manifest as fatigue or abdominal weight gain, even conditions like PCOS, brain fog. 90%, 96% of Americans, that means only 4% have normal, healthy metabolism. This is an American statistic, but I feel like the UK is pretty close behind. The ideal number of steps per day in the research at the moment, I know everyone aims for 10,000, which is great, like aim for that, but the one that's been shown to be most effective for lowering all-cause mortality risk is 8,000 steps per day. So if you are currently struggling to do 10,000, try to just even reach for 8,000, and that is amazing. He said the pandemic and lockdowns, and just as a result afterwards, people working from home, it has caused people to be way more sedentary, and cardiovascular rates are higher from the past few years, massively linked to less movement. I also think there's other factors involved in that, but we will not go into that. That actually wasn't mentioned in any of the talks, but I'm sure a lot of practitioners wanted to make that point too. If you know, you know. And then he spoke about nitric oxide for blood vessel health, and exercise is one of the most important tools for promoting nitric oxide. And if you were to bottle and encapsulate all of the benefits of exercise into a pill, it would be the #1 best-selling drug in the world. We all know that we feel better, we sleep better, we look better, we are happier, we are healthier when we exercise. He is a fan of fasting, like I said, but not as much as he is a fan of exercise. So if you have to pick between the two, you are definitely going to get more benefits from exercising. He said that walkers have much better metabolic health, even if you're doing other strength training and workouts during the day. He would actually prefer you to have these little exercise snacks, he calls them. And you don't have to go to a gym, you don't have to go for a membership. You don't have to be dripping in sweat to have a workout. Even at work, if you can just like sprint down the hallway or just like run up and down the stairs a few times before you start to get hot and sweaty and have to change clothes, that is going to be better than doing that consistently. Is going to be better than like one big workout in the morning, but then you're sat on your bum at a desk all day long and not moving. So these small interventions during the day do add up. Taking the stairs, getting off the tube a stop or two before, even splitting your walks into 3 15-minute walks instead of 1 45-minute walk is actually going to be better. I think the studies that he mentioned said that sprinting, that's one of his favorite exercises, just short sprints. I think it was 4 minutes cumulative, so maybe like 30 seconds, however many times, reduce cancer risk by 40%, which is just insane. But we just want these little bursts of exercise. That's how our body's designed to move. We were just moving all day long back in the day. We didn't have these gyms that we would go to and just purposely like put on our workout clothes and move. We just moved anyway. That's just what our genes and our bodies still expect. The more muscle you have, the more important that is than even body fat levels. So you could have slightly higher body fat levels, but if you have a lot of muscle, that is still going to be really protective. It's very supportive to the aging process, reducing disease risks. It is normal to be a little bit more inflamed as you get older. This is a process called inflammaging, but we can really optimize our muscle, and this starts as early as our 20s and 30s. You want to try and do it as early as possible because it does get harder to progress your workouts and build muscle as you age. And also when you're in the gym, it doesn't have to be a full 60-minute session. It can be very short and sweet. And he said to focus on compound movements using 2 or more joints instead of these more isolated workouts like bicep curl. You want to do something that involves 2 or more joints. So examples would be squats and deadlifts, and aim for 3 to 4 days a week. But if you are currently doing nothing, let's just start with 1. And he says we all focus on, especially in the health world, our blood results and our hormone levels and our glucose levels, but we're less so tracking how much we can bench press, how much we can squat. So every year you should make a note of that and then aim to improve every single time. This is progressive overload, and this is how we get stronger. If you're just going into the gym and lifting the same weights over and over, doing the same routines and not pushing yourself, you're not getting all of the benefits that you could be. And he said that resistance training is way better than aerobic training for fat loss and body composition. Even if you're burning more calories and are more sweaty and out of breath in a bike session, you're actually going to burn more fat longer term when you do a strength training session. You continue burning fat and having a high metabolism for the very next day as well. Exercise increases autophagy much more than fasting. And even if you are fasting, how physically fit you are is the differentiating factor as to how much body fat you burn and how effective the fasting is for you. So takeaway of that is focus more on your exercise and muscle building and weight training rather than fasting, because you're going to get so much more out of it, and there's actually less risks and side effects, definitely for women. I'm not a fan of fasting. Mike says your lower body cells become insulin resistant way faster than upper body. So actually training your legs, your glutes, these larger muscles is going to have an even bigger impact. So if you're skipping leg day, don't. You don't need to do cardio and weights together, and actually doing both together is just too stressful on the body, and you're not giving one your 100%. And a good focus during your workouts is to do 3 to 5 exercises per session. So that could be squats, chest press, deadlifts, and then 3 to 5 reps of each and 3 to 5 sets of each. So just remember 3 to 5, and then you can go in, maybe that'll take 30 minutes, 40 minutes. It doesn't have to be a full hour. We have to get out of these rules that we've created for ourselves because they're just stupid. I used to be the same. I used to think if I don't go to the gym at 10 a.m., there's no point going. Like, there's no point going in the afternoon. And that's just so limiting and silly. So just, yeah, switch up what you're doing. Last few things. Something like a squat is going to work over 200 muscles. And he said if you superset with something like a deadlift, he thinks deadlifts are one of the best exercises, as are hip thrusts. People are doing them more because of just like the aesthetic big booty look, the glutes, but it's actually really protective for your lower back, and it's one of the largest muscles in the body, and that's going to really help your metabolic health. And diet-wise, he spoke less about diet, but he did agree that animal protein is superior at promoting muscle protein synthesis. So you could eat 30 grams of protein from quinoa or beef, and the animal protein is always going to be better absorbed and better at stimulating muscle protein synthesis. Whole foods are always best, which is just like a basic thing, but we often forget, and a lot of us rely on protein powders and supplements. They can be useful, but always focus on real whole foods. Your body's just going to recognize that better, but they can just help you to get to your protein goals. And I typically aim, he didn't say this himself, but I would aim for about a gram of protein for every pound of ideal body weight, just as a range. So if your ideal healthy weight is 140 pounds, which is around 10 stone, then, or 64 kilograms, you would need 140 grams of protein. So you can adjust that to your own needs. And then very last talk of the day was from Tim Gray himself, the founder of this summit. He is known as Tim Biohacker on Instagram. I followed him for a while, and my boyfriend was actually following him too, but then he was just like, this guy is so negative, everything that he's posting is just like doom and gloom, don't do this is toxic. And Tim's actually addressed that himself by saying that's what gets people's attention. So he wishes that he could just talk about something beneficial and not have to like fearmonger, but unfortunately Instagram is like promoting that sort of stuff more. So at the summit, his talk was about the top biohacks of 2024, and I was getting ready to hear all of these crazy things, because there was so many stalls that he had he'd chosen and put together for the day. A lot of the brands are his favorite products, but he actually focused a lot on the foundations of health, which was very surprising, but I was so happy to hear. He shared about the fundamentals of health being nutrition, longevity, ancestral wisdom, mimicking nature, fitness, and preventative medicine. So I will just give my brief thoughts on all of them, because he didn't actually share what he meant by that. So with nutrition, it's using food as medicine, knowing that food is how we get our vitamins and minerals and what our body is made from, but also not being too obsessive about it, because it is only one part of this overall puzzle. And if we become super stressed and extreme with our diet, then it can just be a problem, because we're just going to have high cortisol and food fears, which isn't great. I've experienced that. With longevity, it's just accepting the fact that we are going to age, but there is a big difference between your chronological age, which is the number on your birth certificate, and biological age, which is the health of your body. So I think Tim's 45, and his recent body test, his age test, was 21. I would love to do mine, but the queue at the stall was a mile long, so maybe another time. And we can actually influence how our body ages through a lot of these different practices. Ancestral wisdom is looking back through generations or through our ancestry and just seeing how we used to live, and if there's anything that we can take from that, even just ancient wisdom and methods like Chinese medicine and Ayurveda, and using herbal medicine to help fight infections and optimize our health, because a lot of medications now are even designed from plants, but then they can't patent a plant, they can't put a label on it, so they have to just make it something different, but it's never going to be the same as the whole real plant benefit. Mimicking nature is things like paying attention to your body clock, your circadian rhythm, your light and dark exposure, trying to avoid EMFs and electromagnetic frequencies in your phones and 5G. Fitness is just taking care of ourselves on a physical level, moving our body daily, and building strength, building muscle. And preventative medicine are things like functional medicine, holistic healing, just using what nature provides us first and looking at the root cause of chronic illness and doing everything that we can to try and prevent that if possible. So maybe looking at your genetics, but then not seeing that report as you're screwed forever because you have cancer in the family. It's that maybe you do have breast cancer in the family, but every year you test your estrogen levels to make sure they're going down a healthy pathway. You avoid synthetic estrogens from the environment in plastics, and you avoid birth control pills because they increase the risk of hormonal dependent cancers. So that's what I take from his fundamentals of health, as he calls them. And then he also gave a prescription for health, and it was just this list of like sleep well, eat well, breathe well, but some other things. He said spend time in nature, and he also spoke about the importance of love. And his very last point was good sex, and he was like a bit shy at the end because his mum was in the audience, and he's like, oh, I forgot that I put that one on there. But it came down to 80% of biohacking is the simple stuff. Yeah, making sure you have a good night's sleep, that you're spending time in nature, that you're breathing properly. And 20% are these gadgets and gizmos that our mind typically goes to. One of the ones that he spoke about was, I wouldn't even say it's extreme, because someone might not have heard of it, and it's becoming more recognized now, but it's actually just a basic nutrient. It's called NAD, and I'll try and pronounce the full name. It's nicotinamide adenine dinucleotide. So we'll just say it's NAD, but it's a energy producer in the body. It is derived from vitamin B3, which you can find in organ meats, fish, dairy, and it's involved in cellular energy, brain function, muscle. It's used in chronic pain, and it can be used in IV and injections. I've used it before, I think in a liposomal formulation from Quicksilver Scientific. And then the only other like crazy thing that is not even crazy, because it's coming more popular, it's becoming more well known, is methylene blue. I've never used it. I've been really interested. If you've seen people with a blue tongue in the health and wellness world, they've probably been using methylene blue. I doubt they've had a blue ice pop at lunchtime, but it is, I didn't know, a staple in medical centers because it can help with things like carbon monoxide poisoning, which is cool. There was a group there doing IVs of methylene blue, and it's like this bright blue liquid going into someone's veins, and I would have 100% done that, but I'm always scared of like getting the train home if I've done something different, in case I get any adverse reactions. But its main benefit is increasing oxygen efficiency in the body. I think he uses it for jet lag. It also helps to fight neurodegeneration. It increases this NAD compound, helps with mitochondrial function and energy. It's antiviral, antifungal, antimicrobial. And I did start to hear more about it around COVID times because of the antiviral properties. And then I just posted on my Instagram stories asking, has anyone used it? And quite a few people that I know have. And it was I didn't have anyone who was like, no, it doesn't work, and I hated it. It was either I didn't really see anything, but maybe this is why, or the other one is like, yes, I really did see an impact, so I might try it. So if you see me on my Instagram with a blue tongue, you know what I've been trying. So a few more of the things that he spoke about, like top game changers for him, is blood sugar regulation, and he shared his story of finding balance with that, because he went through a stage of over fasting, being scared of eating, being scared of insulin spikes, and now he was coming to balance. And he now knows, like I promote, is to just help your body use the carbohydrates better and not seeing them as the enemy, or that carbs and glucose are the devil. So he likes to eat them more around his workouts or going for a walk after eating. When you build more muscle, when you have more muscle, you are naturally more insulin sensitive because the muscle absorbs more of that sugar from the bloodstream. And then you can do things like eat in order. So you can start with your protein and your fiber and eat your carbohydrates last on your plate. He also shared about movement and exercise. And from age 30, our muscle mass decreases by up to 8% per decade. If you don't use it, you lose it. Low muscle mass is a risk factor for future illnesses and hospitalization. And we should, evolutionarily speaking, be using our bodies more than our brains. But now it's completely the other way around. We're all switched on all day long using our brains on our phones, working, communicating, which is great, but we're just very sedentary compared to what we used to be like. He's big into accountability for things like exercise. He's very fortunate, as we know, to have a big wellness team and be able to afford personal trainers throughout the week. That's definitely a goal for me in the future, but for now you can use things like online coaches and plans, or even just have a friend that you go to the gym with or that keeps you accountable. In my one-to-one group, I have a little Telegram group for my clients, and over the past couple of weeks, I've paired a few of them up to have a bit of accountability too, just to see how they find it and just to get even better results between the sessions that I'm having with them. Tim had also struggled in the past with a few health issues, and he struggled with high cholesterol and poor liver function for a long time. He had tried everything. He tried coffee enemas, castor oil packs, supplements, cleanses, but nothing worked other than exercise. That's the only thing that made a big difference to that long term. And that just shows you can't out-supplement a bad diet or lifestyle. Another supplement that he mentioned was creatine, which I know what it is. It is one of the most widely studied. I think it's the most studied supplement out there. And the average dose is about 5 grams per day. But I think this has influenced me to try it myself. I've never used it on its own. It's sometimes part of some formulations, but it helps with muscle function and growth, energy production, brain function. It helps with your recovery between sets. It helps to hydrate the muscles. And another thing, I've heard Dr. Ben Lynch talk about this before. He's the founder of Seeking Health, that company. It actually helps with methylation. And about 40% of people have an MTHFR methylation mutation and struggle to detox. So creatine actually supports these pathways. So that might be something that I add because I have a couple of detox methylation SNPs. Tim spoke about breathing, the importance of breathing. Nose breathing increases nitric oxide, whereas mouth breathing is linked to a ton of conditions, and it actually puts your body in more of a sympathetic fight and flight mode state. Nitric oxide helps with cardiovascular health. We can also get nitrates from food like beetroot and leafy greens. Then our body converts that over to nitric oxide too. So it helps with our overall performance during exercise, the health of our arteries, the health of our heart in general. But he showed how mouthwash and certain dental products can strip that bacteria in the mouth that converts nitrates into nitric oxide. So stop using conventional mouthwash. And we don't typically need mouthwash, but if you do want to use it, there's brands like Ricewell that I just use on occasion. Last few things, he spoke about tracking and how if you can't track it, you can't hack it. So he's a big fan of doing regular lab testing, not obsessively. I'm the same. I like to do one big lot of tests every year if I need to and just see what's going on. Because having come from chronic illness, you really value then the power of prevention and not letting things get really bad before you intervene. And yeah, he's talking about tracking your workouts and even sleep. He likes to track his sleep, and he is big into avoiding blue light at night, turning your Wi-Fi off. Brain scans have shown that when you've been exposed to blue light before bed, and this could be checking your phone a few times or going to the bathroom and turning the lights on, brain scans can look like your brain is still awake even when you're asleep. And it can affect your sleep hormone melatonin, which is not just a sleep hormone, it's a master antioxidant. And that means if we're not producing melatonin, we're going to age faster, we're not repairing, we have higher rates of disease. Conditions like Alzheimer's are perhaps linked to the brain not cleaning and regenerating at night. He's a fan of sleeping naked so that our body can regulate the temperature properly. And he shared about a client that he had who was having zero deep sleep. Like he never got any deep sleep when he tracked on a fitness tracker. And they tried everything together. They tried the blue light blocking glasses. They tried avoiding screens, supplements. And the only thing that helped was having complete darkness at night, no lights at all, no tech, and just using candlelight. And that was the only thing after all that time that made a big difference. So obviously extreme, but his overall health will have been massively impacted by not having any deep sleep. That is really where we heal and repair and regenerate. Tim spoke about hydration and how just 5% dehydration leads to 30% decline in performance and energy. And by the time you become symptomatic with dehydration, you're already very dehydrated. So when you start to become thirsty and recognize it, you're past the point that you need to have jumped in and drank some water. You don't burn fat as well when you're dehydrated. You're about 25% less able to burn fat for every 2% you're dehydrated. He said that that's pretty much the percentages that he remembers, but that could be slightly wrong, so you can look that up. And last thing was on healthy relationships. There was a guy there, I think it was Gary Brecker. He was talking about relationships too, and his quote is, "Show me your friends and I'll show you your future." Bad relationships can cut your life expectancy by 50%. And we all know that the people you hang around with, you just become an average of them. So not overlooking that. You can see it's just very holistic, which I love. He spoke about avoiding toxins, supporting detoxification, getting grounding in for just 10 minutes a day. And he made us all laugh because someone he spoke to asked could he put AstroTurf on his balcony. And no, that doesn't work. That's not grounding. He showed a study of hairdressers and how they had a higher risk of babies with birth defects because they are being exposed to things like hairspray all day long. He just showed, like, highlighted the fact that people spray perfume directly on their thyroid gland, on their throat, and we can't avoid these toxins, but we can minimize the effects by supporting our detoxification, and we can reduce our exposure to a lot of these things, especially at home. And he ended on the fact that the number one health hack is having a mission and purpose. I ask clients this in their intake form. I ask, do you feel like your life has meaning and purpose? And then I do ask another one about the childhood. Did you have a happy childhood? These are like some of the last questions in my questionnaire, but a lot of people point them out and think and make a lot of comments about them because it's just very eye-opening, and they've been through the entire form and telling me all of these things that they're doing and have tried, and then when it comes to it, they're just really struggling because they don't feel like they're living a fulfilling life. Or maybe they've had kids and they've always put everyone else first, and then they're starting to realize that they've put their own well-being on the back burner. So just something to think of for yourself. Do you feel like you have a mission and purpose? And it might change as life goes on, and it might not be what you thought that you wanted, but it's so important. So please explore that a little bit more if that calls to you. So overall, I loved it. I loved the whole day. It was a very quick flying visit, and I wish I would have done the full weekend, but I did have plans the next day on Father's Day too. I do hope to be back next year, and I think they're going to be taking it international to Austin, Texas. If you're in the US or you want to travel, that's great. I've heard Austin is a really up-and-coming place for health and wellness. So then that's in May time, and then the London one is a bit later into the year, around September 2025, so you might see me there. And I hope you enjoyed this little recap and takeaway. Maybe you were at the event, but you didn't get a chance to watch the same talk, so maybe I got something different out of it than you did, or if you just couldn't make it, couldn't get a ticket, I hope you found this useful. So I'll see you next week for another episode.
I really hope you enjoyed this episode. If you did, I would love for you to leave me a rating and review on your podcast app, as this helps to support the show and it allows it to reach more people with this valuable information. Come and say hi over on Instagram. I'm at Viva Natural Health. And if you haven't already, check out my website, vivanaturalhealth.co.uk, for tons more free resources and to discover how I could support you further. I currently offer one-on-one consultation packages if you want my top-level support, then more affordable group programs and self-paced online courses. So there really is something for everyone. Enjoy the rest of your day, and I'll see you back here next week for another episode.